And welcome to the Committee of Adjustment meeting for Friday, February the 14th. My name is Tom Hill, and I will chair today's meeting. Before we begin, I would just like to ask everyone that has a portable device, phone or whatever, if you would put it on silent mode. And I'd also like to advise that the proceedings today are being video recorded. And they are available on the township's website. With that in mind, there's a number of microphones throughout the room, so if you are asked to speak to the committee in regard to one of the applications, I would ask that you would come forward, identify yourself with your name and address, and push the little button on the microphone, and it will light up. That way those that are listening to the recorded part of the meeting will be able to hear clearly. This morning, there's a public meeting scheduled with two applications, one consent application and the other a minor variance application. I will briefly summarize the procedure that will be utilized for this morning's meeting. First, the Secretary Treasurer will advise as to when, how, and to whom notification of this meeting was circulated for the applications being considered. Next, each of the applications will be considered separately. Planning staff will advise us as to the purpose and effect of the applications and provide pardon me, any information that is relative. The Secretary Treasurer will summarize any correspondence that we have received on the applications, and from there, the applicant, if there's an applicant present or their agent, they make a brief presentation, and we would ask that you don't repeat the information that's already presented by the planner. And also any member of the public that wishes to speak to the application may do so at that time. Following that, we will close the public forum and bring the application before the committee to ask for questions and comments. And finally, we will consider a motion to either pass, defeat, or defer the decision for of the applications. The consent application being considered this morning are B20-01 for 196 Tower Road, and minor variance application A21-01 for 17840 Georgian Bay. So before we begin, I would ask members of the committee if there are any declarations of pecuniary interest. Seeing none, I would also ask for an adoption of the agenda. Be it resolved that the Township of Georgian Bay Committee of Adjustment adopts the agenda dated February 14, 2020. All those in favor? This motion is carried. Thank you. So our first public hearing will be consent application number B20-01. To the planner, please. Oh, sorry. Before that,
Notice of each of the application was sent by first-class mail to the representative owners and assessed persons within 120 meters, 500 meters, or 800 meters, and to those persons and agencies likely to have an interest in the application. The notices were sent at least 20 days prior to this morning's meeting. Included in each notice was an explanation of the purpose and effect of the application and a key map showing the location of the property. Other relevant information may also have been provided. These circulations were provided in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act 1990.
thank you. Now to the planner, please.
Morning. So the first application is consent application B20-01, which was submitted by Stephen and Tracy Fitchett for lands located at 196 Tower Road. So the purpose of this application is to establish an easement over a portion of the subject lands, which would be in benefit of Bell Canada. So the proposed easement is located along a portion of the frontage of the property and is already an existing easement for Hydro One. So it would essentially just also be providing access to Bell Canada as well. So again, the result of this application is to grant the access. There's no new lot being created or anything like that through this application. So here's the general location map. As you can see, the property is located just west of the urban center of Mactier. And here is just a closer up of the location property here, just west of Highway 400. Aerial of the subject lands. So the proposed easement is located just north of the existing traveled right-of-way. So as you can see here, the traveled right-of-way is located here on part 3, and the proposed Bell easement is highlighted here in black. And again, this is already an existing easement. This is just also granting Bell access. So the township official plan does speak to the allowance of easements for utility purposes and does support that. And staff are in support of the application. And if you have any questions for myself or the applicant is also here as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Is the applicant present?
Yes, we are.
And is there anything that you would wish to add to the planner's comments?
No, that's very thorough.
Okay. Is there any member of the public that wishes to speak on this application? Okay, seeing none, I'll bring the application before the committee for any questions or comments, beginning with Member Caddo.
No, I don't have a problem with this at all.
Okay, Member Jarvis,
No problem with this application.
Member Ferguson,
Quite straightforward, no problem.
and Member Bochek,
No issues with this.
Member Demkew,
No problem at all.
Member Matthews.
Well,
Yay.
All right.
one quick question. If the easement is already there for the hydro, could Hydro and Bell just not make an agreement to use the same easement?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm definitely not a lawyer, but there is some sort of legal reason why they have to still go through the process separately, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Director, that's great. I have no other concern.
On that same train of thought, why is that just cutting across that little corner? Why wouldn't the easement just go around that property? I think there's a concession road on both sides.
Actually, the subject owners might be able to give a better idea of why it's located there. That's just how they've traditionally used it.
At one point, the road was aligned differently, and then the township realigned it, so it kind of, instead of, it made it more straight rather than flat.
Yeah, could I ask you to
Sorry
state
about
your
that.
name?
Tracy Fitchett, 196 Tower Road, Mactier, Ontario, P0C1H0. At one time, the road was aligned differently, and you can see on the bottom left-hand corner how it kind of went on an angle around this way. The township at one point realigned the road, and that's why it's straight now, but because of how it's existing, it is basically part of the road is kind of on our property, and that's why the easement is required.
Thank you very much. Okay, if there are no further questions or comments, I will read the motion. Oh, Madam Secretary, were there any correspondence on this application?
The District of Muskoka had no objections.
Thank you. Now, where's the application? Okay, I'll read the resolution. Be it resolved that the Township of Georgian Bay Committee of Adjustment approves consent application B 20-01 for 196 Tower Road to grant an easement in favor of Bell Canada, subject to the following. A, that deeds for the easement are submitted to the Secretary Treasurer along with a registered copy of the survey plan, and B, that a complete set of digital drawings, files of the reference plan shall be provided to the Township of Georgian Bay. All those in favor? Motion is carried. Our second application today is a minor variance application, number A20-01, for 17840 Georgian Bay Shore. To the planner, please.
Good morning. So the only minor variance application you have is in front of you. So the request of this application is to permit the demolition of the existing dwelling and the construction of a new dwelling set back at the 20-meter setback. And there are two variances that the application is requesting. An increase in the maximum permitted gross floor area to 435 square meters, where 325 square meters is permitted, and to permit an increase in the maximum permitted dwelling height of 8.5 meters, where 8 meters is permitted. Just to give you an idea where the subject lands is, it is this large parcel shown here in black, and I will show you the survey further on in the presentation. It was 2 lots and they have since merged them, so that's kind of why it's a bit of an irregular shape. So the original lot separation was kind of here, making this back portion more of a square, and then the existing cottage is on this lower piece here. So the property is just outside of Bone Island. It is within the Palisade Bay community. It's zoned Shoreline Residential Type 2, Exception 43, and this is the standard zoning for all lots within the Palisade, or the majority of the lots within the Palisade East Bone community. Just an aerial view of that existing lot. You can see the dock located here and the neighboring shoreline structures, and the existing cottage is set back about 11 meters from the high water mark. And the rear of the lot is just a forest. So this on the screen is the survey, and I do have it zoomed in, so don't worry, you won't have to squint too much. So this is the existing, this was one lot, and then this back portion here was the other lot. They merged the 2 lots together. They weren't planning on building on this second portion, or the second lot, I should say. So they merged them together in hopes to get rid of any potential variances, but due to the topography of their lot, they were still into variance for the gross floor area and the height. So they were hoping that merging the 2 lots together would help them, but unfortunately, they still have the variances that are in front of you today. So just to give you an idea of the existing development, so there in red is the existing cottage, and then there was a deck to the rear. I just didn't highlight that. And then they're proposing this new cottage. So they're tearing the existing cottage down, which is set back about 10 meters from the high water mark, and building a new cottage larger in size. The existing cottage is 116 square meters, and the proposed cottage will be 435. And they're pushing it back to the 20 meters with the deck along the front of the cottage at 16 meters, which complies with the bylaw. They do have an existing sauna located over on this portion of the property, and then their dock system located here. It got a little bit cut off as the dwelling was the more important portion. To give you an idea of the existing development, so this is standing on the dock looking towards the existing cottage. So that will be removed, and as a condition of approval is to revegetate where the existing cottage is. That would be coming down. So this is the existing cottage, and as you can see, that change in topography, which is causing that increase in height. Rear of the existing cottage. Another photo of the rear of the existing cottage. So as you can see, that's kind of a bowl area where the flat portion is, where they can develop. The existing cottage, so as you can see at the front of the cottage, it's steeper than it is at the rear. And a view from the water. And you can kind of see their natural beach area that they have here. And another view from further out. So as you can see, it is well vegetated toward the property and along the side. And another photo from the shoreline looking at the existing cottage. And you can see their existing dock system. That's not proposed to have any changes. And a portion of that existing natural beach area. And this is just the other portion of that natural beach area, and you can see the mature vegetation. So the character of this area of Palisade Bay is primarily single detached dwellings located in close proximity to the shoreline, with some accessory structures along the shoreline such as docks and boathouses. So this is the proposed dwelling. So as you can see, the change in topography. So it is a 1.5-story dwelling. So they have calculated the height, which will be that 8.5 meters. And as you can see, it's from that topography. And as you can see on the survey, all of the change in topography on that. So the intent of the maximum permitted height provision in the zoning bylaw, excuse me, is to limit scale and visual impact of structures and to ensure the aesthetic quality of the waterfront area is protected. The proposed dwelling will not exceed the existing tree canopy. As you could see from the photos, there was a lot of mature vegetation, and the increase in height is a result of that change in topography and the variation in elevations. Just to go over their floor plan, so they will have a basement. However, the basement, which you'll see on the next floor plan, isn't accessed from the first floor. It's only accessed from this door from the outside, and it's only going to be a portion. It is 79 square meters, so the rest will just be a crawl space. This area, they're proposing to utilize the full basement, as that's just the way the topography slopes. They could bring in fill to fill up that floor to bring it under the height in GFA, but the view from looking at it this way, whether or not the interior floor is higher, it's still going to be the same view on the outside. So this is the main floor here. Inclusive of the screened porch, it's 298 square meters. 3-bedroom on this floor. And then they have a partial loft. So as you can see, there's an additional bedroom on the loft, and the second floor is 57 square meters in size. So the intent of the maximum permitted gross floor area of a dwelling is to limit massing and to create a relationship between the usable space in a dwelling and the size of a lot. The increase in gross floor area of the dwelling is a result of the change in topography. So the applicant is proposing to utilize the change in topography to have that partial full basement for storage, and then the rear of it being a crawl space. The applicant is proposing to leave the basement full rather than bringing in fill in order to reduce the height. So visually, the dwelling will not look any different whether or not that floor is brought up. So as a condition of approval, site plan control will be applied to the property, and another condition is to revegetate the area of the existing dwelling once they demolish that in order to bring the vegetation back into that area. So those are 2 conditions of approval. Staff recommend approval of the application as it does meet all 4 tests of the Planning Act. The agents are present if you have any questions for them, or if you have any questions for myself, I'm happy to answer those.
Thank you, Dina. Has there been any correspondence on this application?
2 letters of objection were received from Catherine Cooper and Tom Halpenny on behalf of the Cognizant Cottagers Association.
Okay, I noticed that printed copies of that communication is here before us. Does everybody have the 2 documents? Now, I would expect, I just saw this one just a few minutes ago. Not everyone has had a chance to have a look at these documents. I might suggest that we take a 5-minute break here and just to allow everybody time to have a look at those. A comment, Mr. or Member Bocek?
Yes, I'm just wondering if the agents are in light of these copies as well, too? You have not seen them? I think it should be imperative that the agents have a copy of this, too. Thank you.
Okay, copies are on their way. So we'll take a few minutes and just read these over, and that way we'll be able to add some additional, yes?
I just wanted to advise the committee and everyone here that you might have seen hydro trucks in our parking lot, so the power will be going off approximately 10 a.m. I just wanted to let you know.
What, you mean council members will be left in the dark?
Yeah.
No pressure, Mr.
Okay, based on that information, all those in favor?
5 minutes, it's 5 minutes.
5 max.
So it is 9:20, so I've read the ones.
this morning I got up at 6 o'clock to start my wife's car, so it was minus 29, and it just barely started. And then I went to go start mine at 8:30. The key fob, the battery, the key fob was frozen. So the little thing on the dash said, oh, yeah, no connection. So I took it inside, and I set it by the fireplace, warmed it up. And I looked down at it, and there's a thing that says ×2 with a circle. So I pressed it, and the frickin' car started. I didn't even know I had remote start until this morning.
Better get one of those for your wife too.
Oh, no, I'm not telling her. I had no idea. I've had the car for 2 years, and I had no idea it had remote start on it.
Yeah, it'd be nice to have that sometime.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I was looking at it, so cool. Yeah, it was warm over there, it was over here, about 6 degrees.
Whether it's, whether the first floor or
Of course, Antarctica, they recorded 20 degrees Celsius.
well, yeah, she's
Even
been.
here, that, like, they look at any of that.
But if
The
it's
temperature reading
still
was
33% over,
Really?
that new.
in the Antarctica, before it was,
Maybe that's quite a lot coverage. That's scary. But isn't that relative to,
Well, Jamie, the ice is really fast over at the Baxter Ward Community Center. I went out last night.
oh, that would be, yeah.
You take a stride and just flakes come flying off it. It's really hard. What little ice there is there. Tom, you been out on the bay out front of your place?
Just to put up my snow fence to keep people off my water line.
Oh, is that right? Passed. Has anyone had a chance to absorb that? Okay, we're good with that? Then, okay, we have had some correspondence, which everyone has had an opportunity to look at. We mentioned earlier that the applicant is present, and I have a strong feeling that they're going to make a comment, being as they're sitting at the table. I would ask you to turn on the mic, give us your name and address, and then we can proceed from there.
Sure. Greg Bruce from TBB Construction, agent for Joe and Anita Castaldi. Our office address is 1936.
Could I ask you to say your name a little slower? Perhaps?
Oh, sure. Greg Bruce from TBB Construction, TBB Construction Limited, 1936 Commerce Park Drive, Innisfil, Ontario. And agent for Joe and Anita Castaldi.
Okay, very good.
All right. So a little bit of background here. Thank you, Dana, for your presentation. Kind of how we got here. It looks like a big ask, but to really understand the topography helps understand exactly how we got here. So what happened was Joe and Anita had planned to planned to build a new dream cottage, basically. And so they did preliminary discussions with the township and with the planners, and they knew that they were SR 243 with the exceptions. And so one of the things that they wanted to do was maximize the 325 square meter allowable gross floor area. So that's the reason that they purchased the large lot in behind there. So that actually extended their lot frontage to allow them to maximize it to 325 square meters. Then before they were involved with us, they designed the cottage before meeting with us, basically. So they did all their dreams, their wants. They tried to make it primarily a bungalow so that they can think about future use as they're aging and stuff. So virtually everything was going to be on the main floor. I believe the main floor was about 280 square feet. There was no Muskoka room at that time attached to the house. So they designed it. The main floor square area was about, I believe, was about 270 square meters, sorry, not square feet, square meters. And then they designed a small upper story to conform to the 1.5 meters. So their plan was to do a large bungalow with a crawl space to conform. So they presented us with a plan that was 322 square meters, which would conform with the 325 once the lots were amalgamated. So then they came to us about building it and putting it on the lot for them. So the first thing that I did when I did my research was, well, we really need to look at the topography of the lot to see what we can build there. So we had a topographic survey done, and you'll see that now they need to push the cottage back to conform to the 20-meter setback. And if you look at the topographic lines where it's proposed, it gets really steep, and it's bedrock outcroppings. So basically they're going back into the bowl of bedrock outcroppings. So now this bungalow that they decided to build with a crawl space, if you can imagine the front of the lot when looking at the front of the house, you have to build a foundation wall that's about 10 feet tall to level it off at the back. Otherwise you have to blast everything within that bowl to be able to drop the house within that and set it close to the ground. Any questions about that? So basically then, that gave us challenges with the height that they did. So we redesigned the roof and we got it as low as we can, but that front foundation wall is going to be between 9 and 10 feet tall. And we got the back of the house as close to the ground as possible. It's basically going to be one step out, and you're going to be basically at the grade at the house with a 10-foot foundation wall at the front. So we can, to conform and to reduce the gross floor area of that basement storage area that they never wanted. So what we've proposed with that is at the front area of it, if we can, it's got to be included in gross floor area. We could fill that area, like we could bring in fill and fill it to reduce it to 5'11" so that it's considered a crawl space and doesn't count towards the gross floor area. But it just seems like an unnecessary thing to do just to meet a bylaw requirement. So that's 79 square meters of the additional, basically 100 square meter ask of that. So that's kind of a need for that, and that goes with the height too. So that's the need portion of it, and hopefully you guys agree. I mean, we can fill that if to like bring the gross floor area down, we can fill it. There's no intention to use that for any living space. That's why we didn't put any stairs or anything. We just thought it seems like an unnecessary thing to do to just fill an area just to reduce the ceiling height there and call it a crawl space so it doesn't go towards the gross floor area. So hopefully that's fairly straightforward. And the height, just because of that foundation requirement at the front, we can reduce the height if we blast and bring the whole house down, but then we're blasting. I don't know if environmentally, if that's a better thing to do. It also adds to cost, so there is something on that side that would be beneficial to the Castaldis not to do that. But environmentally, I think it's also not the right thing to do. We don't anticipate that we'd have to do any blasting with this proposal. Second part of the thing is, it is a bit of an ask. It's not, it's a want, it's not a need. So when Joe and Anita designed their dream house, they spent a lot of time on it, but without the professional help, we discovered, like, you don't have a Muskoka screened-in room here in your design that you came to us with 322. This is something that you're really going to want to have, black fly season and everything. So we proposed, along with us reducing the roof line as much as we could, we proposed adding, it's an approximately 33 square meter Muskoka room to the side, which then makes excluding the basement ask for the gross floor square area, That makes the ask to exceed the bylaw requirement. It exceeds it by about 29 to 30 square meters, I believe. So it's excluding the basement, that we can fill. If you guys want us to fill it, we'll fill it. But it's basically a 9% ask over and above the maximum 325 square meters. So it's ballpark about 30 square meters to add the Muskoka room to the side so that they don't need to change the design of the rest of the house that they've basically done. It is also their intention to minimize impact to neighbors, that we're going to build this over the winter. So we're not going to take down the existing cottage till September. And with our product, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's a very environmentally friendly product. All the structure of the house will come on 2 trucks that'll just be barged out there. We'll have it on site. So we plan on building this over the winter so that there really will be, and the goal would be to have it ready for the May long weekend following spring. So there will be minimal impact to neighbors. Joe and Anita are very environmentally conscious. They plan on building up the shoreline buffer and everything like that, and we encourage that to be a requirement where the existing cottage was. So from the lakeside, I didn't bring my glasses, I apologize. So Laurel was just filling in, my project coordinator, but she said there was one comment in one of the letters that it seemed that they didn't understand that they purchased the additional lot with one of the comments. So I don't know exactly what that was, but for your discussion. But just overall, the ask and the kind of want part, not the need part, is about a 9% variance exception, about 30 square meters, so that we can just add the Muskoka room to the side, maintain the schedule of building it this winter, and minimize the impact to the neighbors. It's also Joe and Anita's intention. I don't know if any of you know them, but he's a very genuine, humble guy in that. And it's his intention with the lot they purchased in the back to create trails and invite the neighbors to use it and stuff like that. So I think the visual impact from the lake is actually going to be improved. You see the tall, mature trees. When we look back at that original picture, you can see where all the bedrock outcroppings are. There are no trees in the area where we're really going to be building anyway, so we don't anticipate maybe a couple of trees have to come down, but be very minimal because it's all exposed bedrock outcroppings there.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Mr. Bruce. Are there any any members of the public that wish to speak to this application? I take it that's your assistant that you have there with you?
Yeah.
Okay. So no public is present other than the comments that we have. Okay, thank you very much. And you may want to just stay there,
Sure.
in case there's some questions that are coming your way as we go through this. So with that, I'll close the public session of the application and bring the application before the committee for questions or comments. And we'll begin with Member Bocek.
Thank you, Chair Hill. I've read the complete report and also read the information I received from the Cognizant Cotters Association and from one other member, and don't really have too much of a problem with this. 19.5 inches is the increase in height. I don't think that's going to affect anything too much considering the tree canopy. I do have a little bit of concern about the gross floor area increase. We do have the Cognizant Community Plan, which is pretty specific on this, and I think we need to consider why it was put into the official plan, the reasons behind why it was put in the official plan. So I'm having a little bit of difficulty with the gross floor area. The agent has said that they could fill it to bring it below the 5'11". I don't think that's really the intent of anyone. It's the visual, the view from the canoe. It's going to set the cottage up higher. My question is to our planning department, possibly Jamie, since you were involved in the Cognizant plan. Do they have a zero tolerance to blasting in Cognizant?
Through you, Chair, to Member Bocek. Just to clarify, this property is not in Cognizant, it's in Palisade Bay.
The Palisade Bay is bordering Cognizant, is it not?
Yes.
Yes.
So they wouldn't follow the Cognizine guidelines, they would follow the criteria in the Palisade Bay community.
Which is a part of the Honey Harbor community.
It's its own community. Palisade Bay and Eastbourne is
Is
their
its
own
own
community, yes.
community.
As for blasting, I don't know if they have to check.
Yeah, just to be clear, Palisade Bay, Eastbourne Island has its own community plan policies that are separate from Honey Harbor and they're separate from Cognizine.
I didn't realize that, and I don't think it was mentioned in the report, so I was reviewing the Cognizine community plan when it came to this application, but the question still remains, is there ability to blast there, or do we have a bylaw against the blasting?
Dana, if you don't mind, you take your time and we'll come back to you for
Yeah,
a
I didn't want
response
to
on
put you
that.
on the
and-
spot here and
Yeah,
interrogate
no.
you. I just-
Before the power goes out, yeah.
Yeah, before the power goes out, yeah. So, are there any other questions or comments, Member Wojcik?
No, that's all my concerns, thank you.
Okay,
I'll wait for a response.
all right, thank you.
I have a response.
Oh, that was fast.
Okay, in Palisade Bay, there is 3 criteria for blasting. So blasting shall be limited to areas located within the building footprint and only for the purpose of lowering the building. All blast rock shall be removed from the site to a township-approved location following completion of blasting. And blasting to improve conditions to accommodate docks shall be prohibited. So they could do limited blasting.
Great, thank you for that.
Thank you, Dina. Member Demke.
I just had a question, given where this is located now. Is the Cognizine issue not really relative to the whole thing, because this place is not in Cognizine? When they say the standards are must have, shall be, does that now not apply to this property?
If I can add some clarification to that, I think what they were saying in there is general, not to any specific area, but they're saying in the
Okay.
in the official plan that when it says shall, it means
The
must.
official plan covers every area then?
Yes.
Okay, okay. I have to wait to hear more information other than against those rules. It's sounds like you've tried to do everything you can. I'm not sure whether the blasting is going to cause a major cost issue, but I'd have to wait to see.
And we can, if you have comments later,
Yeah.
Member Demke, feel
Yep.
free. Member Matthews.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I have 3 concerns. The wording of according to this message from the Cognizine Cottage Association, where it says shall, is interpreted as a must, and there's no exception to that. And they're suggesting that if there should be a change, that really should be an official plan amendment and not a committee of adjustment. So I have major concern about that, to be sure that we're following proper protocol. And also the way that it's measured. Again, they talk about natural grade versus filled grade, and if, according to this, if we go to natural grade, it's going to be considerably over the 8.5 meters. And overall square footage of an increase of over 33% is, again, to me, that is not minor. I appreciate the explanation from Mr. Bruce, but the fact still remains that it's 435 square meters versus 325. That would be my challenge with this application.
Thank you, Member Matthews. I have just on a question on your question there, where you were saying natural grade versus fill grade. If I might ask the planning department for some clarification there. In the drawings that were proposed here, you see where the natural grade is, and in this case, I think it's mostly bare rock. If during the construction or the planned construction, the applicant raises that area by, let's say, a meter, just in order to correct the contours of that building, does that become the new natural grade? Or, so we're always measuring from where the grade was before construction began, is that correct?
That is correct. So it's the natural unaltered grade, which I may defer to the applicant. I believe the line, they use the elevation from the topography.
We use the topographic elevation, so that is the actual grade on site, based on the topographic elevations. So
Okay.
we exceeded just by,
Thanks for that clarification. I think it's exactly as stated, so, okay, we're good. Member Ferguson, any questions or comments? Oh, sorry.
I didn't know if Mr. Matthews were comments that he wanted a response to, or if those are just, he identified as concerns. Like, did you want staff to respond to those issues or not?
Well, you know, I guess you've addressed sort of the natural one. The shall is the biggest thing that I read this, and according to the letter from this CCA, shall is pretty definitive, and if you want any variance from that, it's an OPA and not a committee of adjustments. And I guess from a question standpoint, could staff confirm that?
Through you, Chair, to Member Matthews, I can address that. So I don't believe their comment on that is correct, and I'll give you my analysis on what I did when I was reviewing the application. Flip to the page. So there is a section under the Palisade Bay community. That says the maximum height of the main building shall be limited to 8 meters and no more than 1.5 stories. So they are 1.5 stories in height. Are they 8 meters? No, and that's why their application is here today. However, there is a policy in our official plan which states, a little bit long, where numbers or values are specified in this text, such quantities are attended as guidelines except with respect to minimum lot area, unless otherwise specified by the policies of this official plan. Deviations from numbers or values, which are minor and restricted, may be permitted without an amendment to this official plan, provided that the principles and intent of the official plan are maintained. So when I was reviewing this application, I looked at what is the overall intent of limiting them to that 8 meters and 1.5 story in height, and that's it's intended to limit the massing of the building, and are they still conforming with that? And it's my opinion, yes, they are still conforming with what the overall intent of that 8 meters and 1.5 stories is requiring. So the application wouldn't need an OPA because they're only slightly going over that 8 meters by 50 centimeters, and they're not changing what the intent of the official plan and what that policy means. That's why an official plan amendment would not be required for them to exceed the height, just the variance.
Thank you, Dina. Could I ask that you, at some point after the meeting, maybe just send us that information? I'd like to have that for future reference.
Yeah, and my apologies, I didn't put that in the report, but going forward, if we have something like this, we'll ensure that it's in the report to make sure that everyone's on the same page on that policy.
Well, I guess just further to that, you said it's a policy, and my understanding is policy carries less teeth than an official plan or a bylaw. So I guess I'd like clarity on policy versus the township's official plan that says 8 meters, shall not exceed 8 meters. And I don't want to use up all our time, but this is a kind of important issue for me at least. So.
If I could maybe just add a bit of color to the whole situation, is that when Dana mentions it's a policy, it is a policy in the official plan. So the intent is that, and that policy that she's read to you is in section A of the official plan, and under how to read this plan and how to interpret the plan. So the idea is that for an official plan amendment to be necessary, typically it's a change in land use concept or a situation. Although the official plan does say if you're changing a number related to, was it lot frontage and lot area, then yes, you do need an official plan amendment for that. But if there's other numbers in the plan in a big picture, it's saying those are general guidelines, so to speak, those numbers. And we're not gonna make you do an official plan amendment to change those numbers, but you do have to go through a zoning bylaw amendment process or a minor variance process if you don't meet the requirements of the bylaw. The whole intent is that there's a public process established for modifying a bylaw, whether it's a zoning amendment or whether it's a minor variance. And that's really why we're here today, is to have that. The process is unfolding as designed. But just to be clear, the statement from the Cognishine Association is that an official plan amendment is required. That's not correct. An official plan amendment is not required based on the section that Dana's quoted. That they were incorrect in that statement. So we want to make it clear to the committee that an OPA, in our view as staff, is not required.
Okay.
And that this is, in our view, the correct forum to deal with this application.
Okay, thank you for that. Member Ferguson, any questions or comments?
Well, my concerns mirror those expressed by Member Matthews. Just so I totally understand it. You were talking, because our GFA is over, with respect to the basement. So you're saying you're going to use about 79 square meters of that entire area? And
Yeah.
the rest will not be used?
Yeah, so it's
just cheaper not to fill it in?
it's cheaper not to fill it in.
It is height, the height is such that...
Yeah, the front is going to look, the height of the building is going to remain the same regardless, because we've put the back walkout, we'll walk right into the rock. So if we end up having to blast it to gain back to get to the 8 meters, we will actually have to blast outside the footprint because you're gonna have rock coming into the back of the house. So you're gonna have to blast back to have, it won't require a retaining wall, I don't believe, but otherwise you have rock coming into the back of the house basically at the main floor.
And your contention is that by eliminating that portion of the basement that will not be utilized, your actual gross floor area overage is about 8 meters,
But I
about
think
8%, not 33%.
That's right. It's about 30 meters, square meters, and it's about, 8 to 9% of exceeding the 325. Outside of that, it's kind of a need there. Yes, it can be looked after by blasting, but then with the blasting rules, I honestly wasn't aware of that before this, but it would have to go outside the footprint at the back of the house because you'd be backing the house into the rock. So I don't know if we would conform to the blasting for that because we have lowered the house as much as possible based on the topographic elevations so that it's basically a walkout at the back of the house on the main floor, and there's approximately a 9 to 10 foot elevation change to the front.
Okay, thank you. And Dana, with respect to this unaltered grade versus natural grade, the way they placed it and the height does conform to the bylaws.
Chair to
Because they have
Member
questioned
Ferguson.
it.
If the application is approved, then they would be allowed to have that 8.5 meters, and it's
Yes.
along where that would be the grade. And that's the natural grade, that's how it lies today. So it'd be 8.5 meters from that.
To the natural grade, which
To the
is
natural grade.
required. Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Thank you. Member Jarvis.
Sorry, point of clarification. I think you may just answer my question, but I'm going to make sure. Go back to the natural grade that you just showed us. So that line that the pilings go into and down through, that line there is the current natural grade, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes,
That
the
helps me a
dark
lot.
black line.
Okay. One of the other stipulations I see in the zoning bylaw is the basement story, which is at least 50% above finished grade. And I get the impression that that basement is almost totally above finished grade. That adds a story to the house, so my contention right now is we're looking at a 2.5-story house from the front, notwithstanding the fact that I would not want to see any blasting anyway. I am concerned about that. I wonder, with that and the fact that I cannot believe that a building going up being 30 in excess of 33% greater in GFA than what is allowed would be considered, despite what Jamie has said here, it would be considered minor. I have a real problem with this. I think we should be looking at an OPA on this. This should not be something coming before Committee of Adjustment, despite my short time on this committee, being today. So I have two concerns. One is the height, suggesting it being 1.5 stories when in fact it's 2.5 stories. And two, the GFA being, again, in excess of 33% greater than what is allowed in the current zoning. So I have real problems with that. And I don't know how we can address it. I understand the concept of the topography being problematic in this case, but in my mind, you deal with the topography as part of the design when you're building it, and or when you're designing it, rather, before you build it. And again, I mean, yeah, it's a nice looking place. One last thing I had before I finish here is at this time of year, it's difficult for us to get out to have a look, to get that sort of view from the canoe concept in our own minds. And even if we could, we'd be looking at snow cover and ice, so it'd be rather difficult to make a proper comparison anyway. So that's my concern. I'm looking at this thing, if you're looking at this from the front, I mean, that's a lot of stairs in front. That's a huge hike up. So yeah, I'm going to go back. We're looking at 2.5 stories here, Jamie. And GFA 33% greater. I have a real problem with that as a Committee of Adjustment. I don't see that as minor.
Thank you, Member Jarvis. Member Caddo.
I guess I gotta be quick, eh?
No, you
10 o'clock.
No, I just, the square footage bothered me a little bit, but it was explained fairly well from the client. As far as the height, you got tons of trees there, that big rock outcropping. It's not gonna be sticking out like a sore thumb I know the area very well. Like I say, the height's not bothering me, it's just the square footage, but once again, you explained it fairly well, how you could downsize it, and that's pretty much all I got to say with that.
Thank you, Member Caddo. If I could just summarize some of the comments that I've heard, there's two issues on the table here, one being the height, the additional 0.5 meters, and the second and most outstanding request here is the increase in the GFA. During the applicant's representative's comments, you made several times made the comment that you do not wish to have that basement, that you feel it's a necessity in order to make things work out on that particular topography. If we went back to that drawing that we saw earlier that showed the side elevation of the cottage, the one that one, I think there's a couple of things that need some consideration here. If there's really no need, or in this case, there's no want for that highly elevated foundation that this building is going to be built on, then I think there should be some consideration taken to, what can either eliminate it or certainly reduce it. And just looking at this drawing, I think either moving it a little bit more forward, in other words, moving partially into that 20-meter setback would lower that property substantially. Or, again, looking at the profile that you've got here, if in fact that was taken off of a topographical survey, a small amount of blasting would allow that whole cottage to be lowered, and let's say you lower it by 5 feet so that it is strictly just a 5-foot area underneath the cottage, then you get away from the 0.5 meter additional height requirement, and that would eliminate the what we're going to call the extra story that we've got there, because I agree with the comments made earlier that any way you look at it, that's a 2.5 story dwelling that's being contemplated here. I get the feeling going around the room here that there is a great deal of concern about the GFA, and I might suggest that if the applicant would be interested in perhaps revisiting this, I also appreciate the comment that the committee has not had the opportunity to do a site visit due to the time of year and the snow cover and everything else. That often makes it easier for us to come up with either better questions or at least a better understanding of what is being proposed. So based on that, I think a deferral of this application pending some additional consultation with the applicant and their agent might be appropriate. Member Bocek, you have a question?
A point of clarity from our planning department, in the Palisade Bay blasting bylaw, did it not say that any blasting has to be in the original footprint? So that would make it impossible to do this build by blasting. We can take that out of the equation. Not only that, even if you were allowed to blast on the new footprint, the back half of the house would be under rock. So blasting is not an option here, in any case. So I think we have to look at,
Pulling it forward.
it's gonna be 18 inches too high. That's really what it is, 19.68 inches too high is a half a meter. And that's what they're here to get a minor variance for, is for that amount that they're over what is in the policy. So I don't have a real issue with that. The basement, I think, needs to be reworked a little bit. I think a deferral is a proper approach so that the developer and the owner can get together and kind of come up with something that's a little more palatable for the committee. At this point, I think I would have to say no to the application the way it's structured right now, but a deferral eliminates additional fees and everything else. And I think we can get to a compromise that can make everyone happy in this case. So I'll vote for a deferral. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Bocek. Member Jarvis.
Just out of curiosity, if we were to remove the basement, we'd still looking at the same height. There wouldn't be any difference there at all, I presume, correct?
Through your worship, or through you, Mr. Chair. Sorry, your worship. Yeah, like, for example, if this were built on piers as opposed to a framed-in basement, the GFA issue would be, as the applicant has identified, would be significantly reduced. It wouldn't change the look of the structure at all, or the height of the structure. But the GFA issue would go away. So not completely, but majority. So that's one of the reasons, again, it's that although there's an additional GFA requirement, and it's 33%, that space is not accessed from inside the building. It's more or less storage space than anything else, but it's only accessed from outside, and that was one of the considerations. Staff coming to the opinion that that additional GFA was minor.
Yes, Mr. Jarvis.
So notwithstanding your comments, one, it doesn't change the height, view from the new type of thing. Two, just the fact that right now the current owner or builder is saying access would only be from the outside doesn't mean some future use would not provide for other usage for that space. So you got to consider what the future would be for that space. There's also a space adjacent to that basement room that's listed as mechanical, which right now is showing as unfinished, but it's also all about grade. Deferral, for the sake of argument here, if that works, but again, I think the best thing would be for us to have an opportunity to go see the site. And that won't happen until after the ice is over, from my perspective.
Thank you, Member Jarvis.
Just want to provide one point of clarification on why it's staff's opinion that it's 1.5 stories as opposed to 2.5 stories. I think we've seen in the cog machine comments that it identifies legally it's 2.5 stories. just as a point of reference, the official plan was constructed in advance of when the zoning bylaw and the definitions were drafted. Based on our view of that structure and how the use of that structure and the different components of it, we are of the opinion that it is a 1.5-story structure. Just back to this reference in terms of the 8 meters and the 1.5 stories of height in the Palisade Bay Community Plan, what we believe the intent of that is trying to do. We believe the intent of that provision is trying to ensure that development stays below the tree line, so to speak. Right. So when you get a 2-story structure, you start to see it above and project above the tree line. That's not the case for this proposed development. It's below the tree line. And we think, from a staff perspective, the perspective drawing that was drawn to scale, which you've been shown a number of times today, shows in our view a somewhat modest cottage. It doesn't appear to be a monster cottage, so to speak. And those factors all came into play in coming into our recommendation that it does meet the 4 tests of variance. All that being said, I just wanted to provide that as information. If the committee wants to defer that today, that's fine. But I wanted you to be understanding of the methodology and the process in bringing this forward as a minor variance and the recommendation.
Thank you for that, Mr. Robinson. I think everybody's had a chance to hear everyone else's comments and come to their own decisions. And I also, with deference to the 2 bits of correspondence that we had in here, I think some of us had similar questions, based on our own research prior to the committee meeting. So those are not the only driving factors behind us. We handled a number of applications coming through here, and I personally see that as 650, 675 square foot usable space in the lower level of the proposed development. It's very hard not to call that not a basement story. So
We would be happy to roll that in.
well, and that's I got that impression from you right at the outset. So you're trying to work around what's there.
Windows, whatever you want. It's extremely challenging. The staff has been quite helpful. We still don't know, even with the deferral, we can go back and redesign. But so what do we do? Like the extension with the blasting, we moved it as low as we could in the back. It's just the only thing that would really help everything would be to pull it forward on the property, but that typically is what we're trying to get away from. Is the basis of the whole plan is you want things further away from the water. So we've been trying to do the right thing, and believe me too, there is a portion of want there with that bespoke room on the side. That's not a need, that's a want because of the way that they design the cottage first and do that. So that portion, I understand, we've got to do something with that. But that storage area in the basement, like even where we propose the actual grade as it goes up in the back, and we were just going to just mimic the grade so that there wouldn't be any blasting. So I guess the challenge with the deferral is we still don't know which direction, what we need to ask for.
Well, you already have an application before the committee of adjustment. Having if you do lower that cottage by whatever means determined, and some of it might be moving it a little bit forward towards the water, maybe to where the existing cottage is now. Moving it forward, will I drop it? You've got a basement structure that's holding the cottage up that eliminates it as being a 3rd floor. You also eliminated the height restriction that you've got, and so you're looking for a minor variance for a reduced setback from front yard setback. That may be easier. I would expect that would be an alternative that might be easier to get approved. Yeah. So based on that and based on the comments we have so far, do I have? I believe we have an intent here by the committee to defer this application based upon getting some further information from the applicant. all of those in favor of a deferral, please indicate by raising your hand. Okay, the application is deferred, and if you would get back in touch with the planning department, we have some discussions on how a different approach may be taken from the application.
We do have some, the client has, I think, just some more photos too, just to, one of the things that we were hoping to do is to have this looked at sooner than later, so that there isn't any impact and we can use it the following season. We do intend to build it over the winter, so time is a little bit of the essence of that. So I can get you guys some more photos. We have drone coverage of the lot, to hope you get a better idea of that as well too, if that can, instead of deferring it till somebody can get out there in May, that would be preferable if that's
But then, please get in touch with the planning department, and they will certainly advise us as to when the appropriate time is to have another look at an application. Yes?
Thank you, Mr. Bruce. You're talking about building over the winter, so my mind of curiosity says, not this winter, next winter.
Next winter, in the fall,
Right.
yeah.
September.
So-
After the September long weekend, we intend to demolish. And
So for a site visit in the spring, it shouldn't really hamper your construction for next winter construction.
Well, it depends if it needs to be redesigned after, if it's not passed, then we have to redesign and we
Right.
have to engineer. This house has not been engineered yet, it's only designed, pending the outcome of the variance
Okay, thank you.
application.
Well, thank you very much for coming forward and. Sorry.
Can I just ask one other question?
Yes, you may.
I know it's outside of our decision
Would
already.
you try to turn on your microphone?
Oh, it does work, there we go. I'm curious, if we're looking at the side view design work that you did, you show piers buried into the ground?
That's just typical, so if it's on bedrock, it
Yeah.
must be into the bedrock.
So that natural grade is more or less bedrock, is that what you're saying?
Yes.
At all,
Vast
okay,
majority of it is.
okay.
And when you look at some of those forward pictures, you'll see when you look at the tree line
Oh,
that is in front,
yeah.
and behind you can see that
No.
there's open space because it's all.
You know, I do see that, I see that from the other cottage that's there already, and I understand. I just wondering if you can drop that back, without the Muskoka room, you could probably drop that back corner down, I don't know, for a couple of feet anyway, but anyway, what do I know about these things? I don't build them.
The Muskoka room actually helped with the average, for the height, the way that it's measured through the bylaw.
Mr. Chair, if I could, I just want to remind the committee that they've already voted on the matter. And the agent is aware that he needs to speak with the planning department, and the planning staff have heard everyone's concerns, and so that is where these discussions will take place, not after the vote. Thank you.
Thank you for your time, everybody.
Thank you.
Yes, you should know.
Okay.
I reprimand today.
Thank you for that.
You're new on board, aren't you?
The next item on our agenda, I would expect everyone's had an opportunity to review the minutes of our previous meeting on January 17th. All those in favor of the approved minutes, and it is now 10:10 a.m. on February 14th, and I would like to read this resolution that says, be it resolved that the Township of Georgian Bay Committee of Adjustment does now adjourn at 10:10 until March 13th, 2020 at 0900, or at the call of the chair. All those in favor? Okay, motion is carried.